ready whenever you want, Rick.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let's see. Who help me out here, because we have had things move around a bit in terms of seating people.
We're
Let's see.
all here. Bob is just arriving now. Waltz, who's an alternate, may not be able to join us. So the full members are all here.
Okay, so we won't be seating any alternates. Hi, Bob.
And for the folks that don't know, Justin and Larry swapped places. Justin is now a full member and Larry is an alternate.
So just for the record, before we get to it, I just want, in case anyone is here because they thought that we were continuing the public hearing on the Cards Mill Road public hearing, that application has been withdrawn by the applicants, the 79 Cards Mill Road application. Any additions or changes to the agenda, Paula?
None?
The minutes of January 10th, 2021, 2022, actually. Okay.
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we accept them as presented. Any second or any discussion or any modification?
I'll second.
That's a second from Bob Powell.
It was Vera, I think.
Vera.
Vera, we'll
Geez,
give that
I'm
one to
gonna
Vera.
have to go up active.
Okay. Any discussion from members of the commission?
No.
All those in favor of approving the minutes of January 10th, 2022? Aye, or raise your
Aye.
hand. That looks unanimous. Okay. Audience of citizens, anything anyone would like to bring up to us that isn't already on the agenda?
So this is Mike and Donna Magaldi from Golland Road. We do understand that the petition or the application for Cards Mill Road has been withdrawn at this time.
Okay,
We just want to say that we support that, and we do feel it would be extremely detrimental. And an application has been filed to repeal the zoning amendment that was made last year. That would allow a commercialization in a residential area. So we just want to put that on record that we have filed for that.
thank you. I appreciate you letting us know.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so that will follow its normal course of action for the commission. When somebody proposes a regulation change, I'm sure that our town planner has explained that to the person who proposed the regulation change. And if you have questions about that, might best be approached when we have a public hearing scheduled for that requested zone change. So just for any commission members or members of the public, anyone can propose a zone change to the Planning and Zoning Commission. There's a fee that's paid that helps defray the cost of advertising, but people are free to propose regulation changes at any time. And it's up to the commission to review those and act on those requests and requested changes to the zoning regulations. Thank you. Anything else from members of the public? Okay, we have nothing under unfinished business. Under new business, no actions to take.
I just wanted to point out that we did receive a change of zone a regulation application today, came in today.
Okay, so that would be under new business. We would be
So we
acknowledging that.
yes, and we technically, even if we were not meeting tonight, the state statutes state that it's received on the next regularly scheduled PZC meeting, which was obviously tonight. The proposed regulation amendment says the purpose of this request is to repeal the regulation amendments that were adopted in 2021 to permit wedding/event halls by special permit in RA districts throughout the town. Please see the attached language and sections that should be repealed. And there's 5 applicants. 6 applicants.
Okay,
That will, because it's the RA district abuts our town property line, we need to notify all the abutting towns and any of the different cogs that are involved. And that has to be 30 days before we have a public hearing. So at this point, the earliest we could have the public hearing is on March 28th, but I'm not ready to set a date yet until I can get those mailings together.
so we'll wait till our next regularly scheduled meeting to set the public hearing date, but it's likely to be March 28th, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just so everyone, public, I'm just gonna make note of that. Okay, thank you. Next up is regulation revisions that we have been working on. I met with Paula in the office this afternoon, and we worked through all of the progress that's been done, rewriting them to this point. And so this becomes a working meeting in that sense, that I'd like to come to a consensus by the end of this meeting, that we have a good workable draft that could go to public hearing for all of the proposed zoning changes under 8.1 of our agenda this evening. Has to do with a response to the legislative action on the part of the state of Connecticut in 2021. And we needed to address 4 points: multifamily housing, affordable housing plan as a town, recreational cannabis perspective on retailing and non-retailing, potential property usage. And then there was a housekeeping item, which was number D of the 4, letter D of the 4 topics, basically using the word character. It's apparently a less desirable word to use than other words that we could use to describe what we're trying to do in keeping our town the way we love it.
The state of Connecticut in the 70s mandated that all the towns use the word character. And now they're saying that that's not the appropriate word to use.
We'll just do what we're told,
Yep.
pretty much. Not exactly. Actually, I think a lot of people on the commission can't be told exactly what. They have their own strong views, and I love that about all of you. So that being said, we're going to get into reviewing the multifamily proposed regulation as mandated by the state of Connecticut. The irony is Columbia for a very long time has allowed accessory dwelling units in residential structures in a pretty easy to obtain manner. And a large number of towns do not allow it. We've always had a very expansive view, have never felt it was something that was at all a problem for our town to work through. And I think it's helped a lot of families create additional units, or in the case, somebody as an investor could potentially do that. Going into the multifamily, Paula, where do you want to start with this? Paul had a draft regulation that's in our packet, and I'm working through a whole bunch of paper here. So it's the one with the date of 9/27/21. I'm not working from the packet. I'm working from actual paper. So I'm going to look and see where in our packet that was.
I actually after we met today, I made a couple minor revisions to it. So the packet date is 2/14. Oh, happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Well, I thought Rick covered that when he said that's why he all loves us.
So the multifamily housing is, the state of Connecticut is requiring that every town adopt regulations for multifamily housing, which we do allow accessory dwelling units, and we do have some multifamily housing as a special permit in certain situations. But this is if any town that does not adopt multifamily housing regulations and allows them somewhere in town, then they're technically allowed anywhere in town. And we have until, this has been in effect since October 1st. So the sooner we adopt something that's to the town's liking is better. There's two steps to it. One is to develop the regulations, and the other is to figure out the appropriate locations for it. And what we've been talking about as a commission for a while is that the CM1 district has some properties that maybe could put a good use, put them to a good use with some multifamily dwellings. They've been commercial for 30 plus years and are still vacant. So it might be, the vacant ones are still vacant. So it might be a good time to think about that. Any applicant would still need to make, to meet the town sanitarian and health district requirements for on-site septic systems. But the regulations can outline the number of units, the how close together they can be, the setbacks, and how many stories and what they would look like.
So the variables in the proposed regulations as they were sent out in the packet, we can go through them point by point, but I think that I'd like to focus on the bigger issues here. And a bigger issue is for state compliance, we do need to address multifamily dwellings. And there's two different aspects to this. You know, there's a single family house that could become a duplex, or it is a duplex, or building a duplex on a single family lot is one level of looking at this. But then we get into what about 6, 8, and 10 units developed on a single lot? And if we want to allow that, where do we want to allow it in town? And we're going to be forced to allow it. So the key is to allow it in areas that are appropriate from my perspective. And I don't mean to tell everybody what I think we should do. I'm giving you my take on it, but obviously I want your take on it. I want everybody's input going into this. So assuming we're going to allow larger developments of multifamily housing, 3, 4 family buildings, possibly multiple independent buildings on a single lot, it really becomes a constraint put on us by the sanitary regulations. So we can provide for a very expansive use of land, but it may not be technologically feasible. And the more units, the larger the piece of land has to be. So coming up with a basic guideline as to where in town we might allow this, if it is engineerable, is important for us to do, so that I'm assuming people on the commission don't want to see an 8-family multifamily apartment building going up next to a single family house.
No.
So that said, if we simply take a look at our CM1 zone and authorize allowing multifamilies there, where the more dense housing has more in harmony with commercial uses than it does in the traditional RA zone that's in town. Is that a direction the commission wants to go? Rich?
My only problem with that is you take away from any possibility for commercial, because once you put residential next to it, it really limits what you can do commercially right next to a residential property. Makes it more difficult, such as lighting, noise, exactly what they do.
That's a great point. And it's something that we have to consider. Initially, I proposed a small subset of the CM1 zone that we might allow it in, not wanting to give up what precious little commercial land we had in town to the residential use, multifamily residential use, and didn't really consider the point that you just brought up, Rich, and that's a really valid consideration, is what can we do next door to a multifamily property?
Hey, Rick, is there any way we could, along those similar lines, do a subset of the RA zone and not get involved with spot zoning type of situation for multifamilies in certain areas?
We could, Rich, Rich was going to say something, but I wanted Paula to bring up a point that she made to me earlier today. Rich?
Could you designate like the Route 6 corridor? Because when you start getting into the multifamily housing, you get more involved with, buses and different types of things. And people already in the Route 6 corridor already have lots of traffic, already have lots of stuff going on. So, if you put up like one of those 6-family multi-tenants, those are people that are going to probably need the buses to get into the cities and maybe into Hartford and Manchester. So that could already be convenient. There's some large properties in those areas that could probably work that.
Paula had a list of properties that might have potential for that type of development and what their acreage was. And that's without us having a conversation about the number of units per acre or number of units in totality that might fit on these parcels. But she did point out a concern about not using existing zones. And Paula, if you could articulate that, because I don't think I can explain what you explained to me earlier today as well as you could. It has to do with if it's some subset, meaning it encompasses an RA zone that we might want to repurpose, we have to rezone that area of land. That's its own process. And then if it's not the entire CM1 zone, we would probably have to create a subset zone that would be, in essence, rezoning a subsection of a CM1 zone if we deem some small portion of the CM1 zone was applicable, but not other portions. Paula, could you point out what you pointed out to me today?
Yeah, certainly. And it's the other thing I want to point out is these vacant lots. Excuse me, I have to admit somebody. These vacant lots, and with the spreadsheet that you've all seen many times, the vacant lots were, I only looked at the larger ones because I think it needs to have a minimum lot size. And these have been designated as commercial for what, Rick, 30 years? And have not been developed.
Yeah,
So
we attempted to guide the development in a certain direction going down the Route 6 corridor, and nothing that we've done has changed its trajectory.
And I agree with Rich that the Route 6 corridor is a good place for something like this. But this is all the Route 6 corridor with a little bit of area that's on the Route 66 East. A great place, I think, for multifamily development could be in a large parcel that is adjacent to the plaza and can only be reached. The DOT would only allow it to be reached through the plaza. That would be a great spot for multifamily housing.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you know it's a telemarketer.
Oh, it's you? I was just looking to see who I needed to mute.
Answer the phone.
And there's not that many properties that really have anywhere in town that have potential for a large development. And I mean,
Well,
We
do we
were-
need, are we actually required to have a large development? It just says that we just have to have a
allow it.
zone.
We have to allow
Right, you
it.
have to have, yes, but there's a difference between having to allow it and having to allow a huge many apartments.
Right.
I mean, you could have an 8-family apartment house like up on Wellswood and Hebron that doesn't look terrible if it's on a large parcel enough and you have,
Right.
really good setbacks. I see that as a residential use. I don't see that as a commercial, and I'm concerned too, like Rich said. I mean, just because I know nothing's happened down there for the last 30 years, but if something were to happen down the road, that's a good income producing situation for the town to offset the residential tax base.
My guess is a multifamily dwelling, a building with 8 units in it, let's say, or 6 units in it, that would bring in more tax. That would bring in more taxes than a metal Butler building by far.
Yes, but you're not looking at the bigger picture. It also adds to, the metal building doesn't add to the cost of running everything else in town.
No,
Yes.
people do.
Yeah,
people
income basis is not something I think that is within
We're
the
not
realm
we're
of
not privy to do that anyway.
our purview, so that being said, I think we have to base our decisions on other factors.
So there's in the CM1 zone, if the commission did want to do that, and you could limit it to 3-family dwellings, and that's considered 3 is considered multifamily. So it doesn't have to be large. And maybe there is another place in town to have it, that if you are creating a totally separate zone or altering a portion of one zone, you're creating a new zone technically. And you then there's far more hoops to go through when you go to create a new zone. And the property owners within those zones would have to be notified. So it's a huge process to go through to do that.
Well,
And I
can
don't
I
know.
can I ask
And
can I ask something?
Can I finish? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
sure.
I'm not sure we're going to have multifamily dwellings knocking on the door wanting this anyway. The developers are not going to be seeking us because we don't have city water and city sewer. If we did, it'd be a different story. We would already have some if we were like that. I'm just giving advice. That's my job.
The zones that you showed, or potential areas lots that you showed, were on Route 6, and if I recall, on the opposite side of the street, that was already residential, wasn't it?
There's a lot of residential along in there. And
So
Paul, are you able to share the map that we looked at today?
I should be able to pull it down. Well, I can go to GIS.
The map that had the CM1 zone delineated with the Route 6 corridor that had no markings on it.
I don't have it here. I could get it through, I have to go to the town website to find it. Or it's actually on CROG as well. I don't know if I can work on that while you guys talk about the language here, or how, if you wanted to limit this to, only 3-family, or what size you would want to have on the.
Weren't we gonna get a map with all this stuff highlighted for us to look at?
That was a few months ago, and I thought we would do it, but then life happens. I'm sorry.
That always happens.
I mean, I had it all prepared for a night about a month and a half ago, but we never got to it. But
I have a question.
Please
To me-
go ahead.
Oh, okay. When I was wondering why we would need a separate zone for this, number one, and with large parcels that we already have in town in the RA zone. I know, when I was on the, brand committee for the recreation, for the brand money that they donated to the town, we toured a lot of large parcels in town. And it would seem that the residential might fit there. And I'm wondering if we made the regulation such with the, like I said before, with the setbacks, with the lot size that would be required in order to do this, that gave the abutting neighbors plenty of elbow space, if that wouldn't be putting the residential use in the residential zone, in the RA zone, rather than putting it down with the commercial. I just don't.
Okay, I hear what you say, Vera. Going back to the commission as a whole, how many people think that we should pursue a way to find location in the RA zone for multifamily housing as opposed to deferring or defaulting down to, or not down, I don't want to say up or down, as opposed to finding a place in the either the entire or a subset of the CM1 zone? Rich? Or you're that's saying you'd prefer the RA zone? That's Rich and Bob
And me,
and Tom?
Yeah, me
Um,
too. Me too.
After listening to what's been discussed tonight, I'm inclined to ask us to dig into that area. And if we have to redo our zoning to allow a specific area within the RA zone, I think that's work that would be well done for us.
There were a lot of large parcels that we looked at, several large parcels down on Pine Street, up on 66, Andrew Chowski Farm, a lot of down Pine Street, down behind Larry Messier's. There was a large parcel at one time down there for sale. A lot of big parcels, and I think if it was done correctly with the correct setbacks and a limit as to how many units per building, I think it could be tastefully done and mixed with the residential that we already have.
I think there's just piggybacking on that. I think there may be a way to limit the amount of units per acre so that it's in harmony with the rest of the residential zone. Right now we have a minimum lot of 50,000 square feet.
50.
And do we say there's 2 units per acre or 3 units per acre or whatever, and have a sliding scale or whatever to kind of control the development? But I think it could be done in a way that would not be adversely affect the RA zone.
So the question
Agreed.
is, do we want to pursue a subset of the current RA zone, or do we want to potentially allow it in all of the RA zone?
I don't think there's a subset. I think if you develop the criteria for the development, you can, in some sense, control what the development's going to be and let it just happen in the RA zone.
You can do it by,
It would fall into place if you set it up right.
Right.
Ed-
Yeah, because if
Ed
you
had
had
his
like
hand
5,
up.
if you had like 5 acres or 4 acres
Yep.
and
Right.
200 feet back from the street, and I mean, yeah, I think there's ways to do it nicely.
I'm going to recognize Ed next. Ed,
I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
that's okay.
So how would you handle public transportation going down Pine Street and all that other stuff on a situation like this?
If it's not a huge amount of traffic and you don't have a lot of units, what extra are you talking about for traffic compared to having single family homes that might have 4 or 5 drivers in the family?
I don't think we're addressing public transportation, Ed, in any way whatsoever. I don't think there's
No.
even
No.
the most
there's no
remote
public-
potential we're going to see public transportation if you're talking about buses and bus
Yes.
lines, I
No,
I
they're not
just
going,
don't,
no, they're not going down Pine Street.
they're not gonna be going,
They're
they're
not,
not gonna
they're
be
not
going on our
coming to
back roads.
Columbia.
I mean,
Okay.
is
They're not
there a
coming to
public
Columbia.
transportation stop in Columbia? Paula, do you have any awareness? Anyone know anything about?
Yes, there's public there's a commuter bus that goes to the parking lot near Vera's
Right.
business.
Yeah,
That's it.
it goes to
Is it-
Hartford, it goes to Hartford and Wilmette.
So that's
That's it.
kind of it.
If,
Yeah, and
So-
even and Rick, even my experience at WRTD, they do not go in those kind of neighborhoods.
Oh.
And they've got 40 buses, so.
yeah, any sort of multifamily developer and residents would fit in with this, with what's here in the town. They're not, and it's, people are afraid of the word multifamily, but it just means, when we already allow multifamily in town, and we have several multifamily dwellings currently in town from before we
Yeah.
had regulations. We don't have issues with any of them.
Well,
Um,
I take this as, I take this as clear direction from the commission that we want to pursue this potentially in the RA zone. I have my concerns about the entire RA zone, but let's leave that as something for us to discuss going forward. Let me put my head back together with Paula, and I'd like to keep this moving so that hopefully we get a public hearing scheduled by
We've already
no
had,
later than April.
we have it
and-
scheduled tentatively for April 22nd.
So that's my focus. So at our next meeting, I'll have put my head together with Paula, taking the perspective that we learned at this meeting from the commission and see what we can come up with.
Sounds good.
All right?
The draft regulations, which are in tonight's packet, lays out the fact that, it's, you guys will dictate the minimum lot size. And maybe it's,
Right.
you want 3 units, the minimum lot size is 5 acres. So that it will fit in. And the buildings are, 50 feet from the sidelines or 100 feet from the sidelines. That's
Right.
all will be in the regulations. We already allow something similar to this in that we allow senior housing, and the Dartmouth Village is senior housing. That's affordable housing, that's based on regulations in our current zoning regs. We have neighborhood residential housing, which, again, those are multi-units. They're not.
So I'm sorry, are you done? Are you all
I'm done,
set?
yes, yep, I'm all set.
Okay. So just going back over what was in our packet tonight, it was labeled proposed, it didn't say proposed, but draft for discussion 52.7.21. And I'm not going to go through them line by line. I won't do that to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If something's going on with my light, I apologize. In any event, so they covered the intent, the purpose, site eligibility, other requirements, more housekeeping. Going through the process that you would need a special permit to do this. Design and technical requirements, where we would get into the setbacks and things like that. Density and number of units. So there was something on the second paragraph of the last page of these proposed regulations, and it had to do with the number of units that might potentially be proposed, but it would really be tied in with the acreage that we would require to do this. So if we're talking about allowing 6 units for a ranch style or 12 units multifamily for non-ranch, this was in contemplation of us doing all of this in a commercial zone. Excuse me, I'm gonna just change my lighting in here. So that said, uh, what's in the proposal here may not be in harmony with the direction we're going as to where in town we would allow these.
Correct.
So we have work to do. And I don't propose that we're going to get it done tonight. I'm going to propose, if you have some thoughts, get those thoughts to myself or to Paula, and we're going to try and get these regulations to a point where we can look at something close to being finished, and then we can add our refinements to it or change it wholesale. Not tied to anything that's created. We're just trying to create an efficient process for everybody. Okay.
Good.
So that said, the next item on the agenda is item B, is the Affordable Housing Plan, which is a separate document that we're going to create, and Paula has created a draft. And Paula, have commission members seen the draft that I took a look at today?
It's in the packet. I don't think
Like
I
it.
have much time to read it because it's
So
about till
It-
late this afternoon.
a plan is just that. An affordable housing plan may coincide with some caveats that are in the multifamily part of a regulation change, but the plan is not a regulation. It's simply a plan, much like the plan of conservation and development. So the purpose to create the plan is to create a document that will satisfy the state requirement. But the regulation changes are where our intent is applied to the town. So it could be that one part of the affordable housing plan that may suggest, for example, a density bonus if we have a certain percentage of multifamily units in a potential development, if that be deemed affordable by the applicable standards, that they get a density bonus. Maybe instead of 6 ranch units in a given 10-acre parcel, maybe they can get 7 units or something like that. And I don't want to get into the specifics of it because I think it's important that we hammer home what we're going to come up with for multifamily housing as a regulation and where it's going to be located. And then we can talk about some caveats in the form of possibly a density bonus to incentivize some of the units being on a federal designation level being affordable. Any thoughts on that? I've had more time to think about this than all of you, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot. But if there's any thoughts, I'd love to get them out on the table, at least for a discussion, so that they're in our minutes and that they really gel into a discussion that we have at our next meeting.
I'm reading it now.
Okay. Yeah, read it going into the next meeting. We don't need to do this now. To have a group reading while we're online, I don't think is productive. Tell me if you disagree. I'm going to go whatever the thoughts of the commission are. That's the direction we're going to go. I just try to guide this through a process that's more efficient from a time perspective. How can we do this and use our time and use the members of the public time and our staff's time efficiently? So, I'm thinking in terms of maybe one additional residential dwelling added to what we would allow as a baseline if we meet certain thresholds for affordability. A certain percentage of the total units that are being developed are categorized as affordable housing from a federal standpoint. Rich, I'm sorry, did I overtalk you?
No, I was just gonna say, I agree. I'd like to read it in its entirety, and
Right.
understand it.
I would like to do that too.
Yeah, so let's not get into a lot of detail, but I'm going to keep this, even if we have public hearings coming up of any sort, I'm going to always try and get this on our agenda and take some action on this at each meeting, because the best work that we've done is where we put our heads down and work on a regulation that we need to address and then just get it done instead of letting things go on. And I'd rather work on one regulation and get it done than have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that we're working on that when we were doing that years ago, it seems like none of them ever got to a finishing point. I don't want to be in that position as a commission.
Good idea.
Okay, next up, anything else you want me to cover on this tonight, Paula?
And the affordable housing plan? No, just remember that the point of it is to look at some of the demographics that we have in town and the housing that we have in town, and just think about a plan for it. And it is just that, it's a plan. It's not a list of things that have to be adopted. It's a plan going forward. And we have a lot of people in town that live in town currently, especially folks that are over 65, that are having trouble paying the amount of costs they have for housing.
If you took a look at the demographic group that we're grouped in with, the Greater Hartford demographic, the average household income is in the mid-60s. Is that average or?
That's for one household, yeah. And in town,
And our
Yeah.
average household income in Columbia is 50% higher than what's the average for the demographic analysis group that we're part of. So how that applies, that's something we'll discuss more later. So I'm going to move on to recreational cannabis.
Excuse me, Rick, before you do that.
Yes.
Is there part of the discussion of affordable housing, does that tie into the multifamily housing as well?
Indirectly, the affordable housing plan is a separate document, but enable compliance with allowing affordable housing would be probably legislated within the multi-housing.
All I'm saying is that as we think about affordable housing, should we also link it to multifamily housing?
Well, in essence, that's the only way we can address it. So yeah, yes is the answer. Whether it's linking or it's just there, that's going to be the net effect.
Right. It's just different nomenclature.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the distinction that Paula made to me earlier today with that, I wanted to make sure that you understood. The affordable housing plan is a separate document. It's a separate thing that she's created that the state wants from us, but it's just a plan. It's non-binding on us.
Yep.
The real implementation can only occur within a regulation, and that would the mechanism we have in front of us most likely is the multifamily housing regulation that we're going to come up with. Rich?
Ties together.
Is there a difference? So I think of affordable housing as purchasing. I think of multiple housing more as a low income type housing for rentals. Is there any differences in how this should be looked at?
Good question. I don't know that absolutely, Paula. So creating housing that is rental housing, could that satisfy it, or does it have to be for ownership by?
It can be anything, and it's
Either way.
based on the cost of the housing, which that includes your rent or your mortgage payment, the insurance, your taxes, utilities. That needs to be less than 30% of your income, in the way that they define that, which is cumbersome. So it has to be 30%. And then it qualifies.
So Paula had sent something out, I don't know, a year or so ago, and it talked about affordable housing as in purchasing to get people in their own homes. So I'm not sure if this has anything to do with that, or just something to think about.
I don't recall that, but it would be the same topic. I mean, we have an awful lot of people in town we have young people that move out of town because they can't afford to live here.
There's a multi-year wait to get into Bidwell Village for seniors. There's a shortage of that housing in town that many seniors in our community would love to continue to live in town or come in and begin living in town. And
But multifamily can be rental, can be ownership, could be condominiums, could be whatever.
Be
Correct.
townhouses, could be ranches, could be whatever, yeah.
Yeah,
It just-
it's just more than one family on a,
Parcel, yeah,
Yeah.
on a parcel. Yep,
And from what I understand, affordable housing does not equal low-income housing. There
no,
is a difference.
huge difference.
Right. But people have a tendency to think that they're the same thing, but they're not.
You're not, no.
Bob, I always love hearing what you have to say on this. You're the architect and you have a very broad experience um, in all things building. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the recreational cannabis part of the potential regulation changes. Couple things that have come up. My perspective has changed, but I don't want my perspective to be anything other than one of the members' comments on this. I clearly had a perspective early on that I didn't want to see us limit in any way cannabis retailing, in the sense that I wanted to allow it anywhere within our commercial manufacturing zones. Just because to me, it's another retail operation, a little different than other ones that have come in, but maybe not that different from alcohol retailing, which is controlled by the state in terms of the number of retailers that we can have in town based on our population. But that said, retailing and distribution, I didn't see those as anything but rather benign retail uses or like commercial uses. I think the concern that's come about has to do with marijuana cultivation and manufacturing operations for marijuana products, mostly because we don't know what we don't know about it. And looking forward, I would hope that we do enough research on this so that we can make a more informed decision. And after my perspective on this has gelled into, maybe we need a prohibition with the intent that it be temporary on manufacturing and cultivation operations, because clearly cultivation isn't going to be occurring based on state regulations outside. It's going to be in a building. And do we want that occurring in an RA district, or should it be in a manufacturing district like it is nearly anywhere else that it's done in America right now? But I don't want to make decisions on that till we have time to cull more data and become more well-informed. So where I'm hoping the commission goes is we state categorically that manufacturing and distribution is acceptable in our commercial manufacturing zone, and come up with appropriate verbiage to support that. But
Retailer, you said manufacturing.
did I say? I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Distribution and retailing in
Yes.
our CM, our commercial manufacturing zones. But cultivation and manufacturing in any way whatsoever, until we know more about this new industry, I would rather see us have a prohibition. Now, we could have a moratorium for a year or something, but I'd rather put in place a prohibition until such time we decide that we don't want the prohibition. Then we're not facing a time deadline that could go past us. And
Yeah, I think as long as it's tied to a, sorry, Rick, I didn't interrupt you.
Justin, you're speaking for the
okay.
first time as a regular member of our commission. Congratulations.
I know, and on cannabis too. So, no, I think I agree. I think the retailing side of it is pretty straightforward. Should be treated any different than alcohol distribution. But if we're going to create a moratorium on anything else as far as the cultivation, then there needs to be a time frame behind it.
And I lop wholesale distribution in at the same level as retailing, because it's not, there's no, the assumption is there's no chemical operations. There's no odors created based on a manufacturing process or a cultivation process that could be unleashed on the area. And there were concerns about that. I may not even have those concerns, but I don't know enough about it to make a learned have a learned perspective on it.
Hey, Rick, Tom, if we are we under any time constraints in terms of what we wait to do? Suppose somebody comes along and applies tomorrow. I mean, what do we have in place to protect ourselves?
They can't apply until, they have to first apply to the state and they get their bona fides verified, the fact that how they'll operate, no matter what it is. And then July 1st is when they could then apply to a town.
So I look at July 1 as the date that we need to
Yes.
take any action
Correct.
prior to that.
Okay, so we do have that time frame to deal with.
Yes, oh, definitely.
I was thinking it was October. I thought it was initially October, but it's now, it's July, I guess.
Yes, it is, July 1st.
Okay,
So I misspoke earlier. So I'm suggesting that we ask Paula to help us draft regulations that allow recreational cannabis, subject to all state authority, to be retailed and
Delivered.
delivered wholesale distribution operations, if appropriate, in our CM1 and CM2 zones. And
okay,
that we adopt the drafting of a prohibition of manufacturing and cultivation within town until such time, and actively review it after the prohibition. We're not done. That's just the start of the process. But having a prohibition in place doesn't give us a time frame that we have to act within. And then we're going to see a lot of information. And Paula had some information about the towns that have prohibited it. So moving forward, I want to take an expansive view. I don't want to pass up on a viable opportunity for underused commercial space that could be cultivation space or manufacturing space, but it's got to be responsible and it's got to be appropriate for our town. And if it isn't, then the prohibition may never be lifted, but we can readily and easily lift the prohibition at some point.
In the and actually in the packet, after you left today, Rick, I drafted something that's in the packet towards the back. But the prohibited uses list all the things that the state allow, and the town could then, a year from now, or in October, November, decide, well, maybe if a food and beverage manufacturer would be okay, well, then you can write regulations to allow a food and beverage manufacturer in Columbia, and then everything else would still be prohibited. So it isn't like it's all or nothing. There's different uses that could be pulled out, and as we're doing now with looking at the retail.
And I would be suggesting that we prohibit any retailing or distribution or manufacturing or cultivation in an RA zone as part of that prohibition. And we may decide that we think that there's areas within an RA zone that would be appropriate for cultivation. That doesn't seem like it on the surface at first thought right now. My mind would be open to that. I would certainly want a lot of public input on anything that we contemplated in that manner, especially cultivation. If it's going to occur in town, which it likely won't, but if it's going to occur, we want it to be where it's most appropriate.
The other towns that have adopted cultivation regulation have placed it all in their industrial districts. It's the big cities that have, huge industrial parks that half the buildings are unfortunately empty. So that's the only places that they're allowing them in that.
that makes sense, so.
I was
I've
going to make a
seen-
joke, but I shouldn't joke when we're
All
being
right.
recorded, so I won't.
I've seen
Jokes are not good, Brent.
I've seen cases where in warmer states, they're actually growing it during the summer outside, as a regular crop. They're not growing it in a factory situation. It's an agricultural crop, this standard summer growth season.
Well, one of the things I would want us to do as part of our evaluation process is be very cognizant of and well-read on the state regulations.
Our
Because
state,
there's no sense in us allowing something that the state will never allow. You know, our authority
Right.
comes from the state.
and I had hoped that our state would have built in some regulations that would help the towns to understand that different, and it's actually better for them to be inside because the odor and lighting can be controlled. And they don't actually want to grow it as a crop. Maybe somewhere in California where the temperature and it's conducive to grow year round, but they need year round crops. And they need lights. They want it to grow fast, so they have to be all under light. So I'm not sure you'd want that outside.
So are we all in agreement that that's the direction we'll go for right now? Is anyone concerned about a potential prohibition? We can discuss this in more depth later, but I'd like to at least get the draft language in place for all of that. And Paula, you said you sent something on that?
It's probably the third page from the end of the packet
Okay.
tonight. Yeah.
All right. I'm not going to open that up tonight. I'm just going to ask you to look into this. So we're going to have a lot to review. I'm trying to keep the meetings to an hour and the next meeting to an hour and the next meeting to an hour. So are we all set on recreational cannabis? Everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Next up, character was just wordsmithing that the state didn't want us to use that word anymore. So we will go through.
Excuse me, Rick,
Yes.
does the state have a recommended word to replace character?
But it's a physical characteristic.
Let's just go with that then.
Well, it's the context and I think it's 32 places in our regulations and I've got a draft that there's places where you don't even need the word. So it's fairly benign and easy to take.
It's wordsmithing.
Yeah.
You know, we'll review it just before we're ready to vote on this package or when we're doing the final review of the package.
Okay.
Next up is going to 8.2, the section 3 subdivision
Not
regulation modifications.
Section 3, not subdivision. Section 3 revision on zoning permits.
I'm sorry, not subdivision. Did I say that?
Yes,
Okay.
we're multitasking too much.
So some minor changes to the regulations, mostly under section 3.2 or the definitions, which are the second page of the 2 pages that Paula sent out. Were there any changes from this afternoon on that?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to review those. So when we do a public hearing, we're going to probably roll all of this in for under 8.1 of our agenda tonight, the A, B, C, and D, and then
B does not go to a public hearing, so it would be A, C, D, and then 8.2.
that's right. The affordable housing plan doesn't have to go to a public hearing. It can be adopted as an action by the commission, and that's how we'll likely do it. And then there is in the section 3 revision, and I consider it minor revisions. I did make some notes here. No. Where we reference on that second page, and I don't know if anyone here can react to this, because if you go down to revision of definitions under structures, it refers to outdoor storage containers. I'm not sure what those are.
We have a whole section. After you left, I looked it up again, and it's section 66.2. We have regulations for outdoor storage containers. And we allow temporary containers without any sort of a zoning permit. But it's a permanent storage container that would need a zoning permit.
And we defined storage container because I've never used that term in my.
I'll look at
Yeah,
that.
what's the definition?
I'll look at that again.
Okay. I don't want to vote for something I don't know what it is.
Good point.
You know, storage shed, I know what that is.
It's a word that's been in our zoning for 40 years, probably. A phrase.
Ed, what were you gonna say?
Are you thinking more like a shipping container as a storage container? Is that?
That's
you're
what I'm
talking
not sure about. And I don't like not being sure, because then I know the public is not sure.
Those are not permitted. It's usually about the only time you find them is the during a job construction project where there's a temporary trailer. Is for storage of materials. That's
But
generally.
let's make sure that
I
we define that in a way that we all understand.
I will open up the section 6.2
Okay,
before our next meeting.
okay, thank you.
Well,
Um,
there's several people who have shipping containers here in town.
I was gonna bring that up to everybody. Bear with me, Vera. That's gonna probably come up in the under the next item.
Oh, okay.
The allowing it in our regulations and somebody having it are two different things.
Well, we had somebody come before in the building department and get a permit for those
There's
shipping
I know
containers.
there's one property that placed them on property, and the zoning official had them, and they were very willing to do it. Put roofs on them. They look like you'd never know it was a shipping container because it has sides on it and a roof. But
Well, there's just shipping containers behind Columbia Motorsports, behind Hosmer Mountain, behind the Moose.
Yeah, can we, this isn't, let's get into this under communication and reports if we could. Vera, hold your
Okay.
thought. I want to bring it up.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
we're all set on item 8.3. Under communications and reports, anything that you want to bring up, Paula, because I did have a talk with Connie Kislick today.
That should
And I'd
come
like
up
to
on-
share some of that conversation with the
that should
commission.
come up under executive session.
Yeah, so I have a report that I sent out that was sent to me by Connie. And we will go into an executive session to discuss this because it has to do with enforcement issues, and they're very sensitive topics. Is there anything else that anyone on the commission wants to bring up as part of our open discussion? Anything from the audience of citizens? Is there anything anyone from the public would like to bring up to us that isn't already on the agenda? Either raise your hand or unmute and say something. We don't only have a few members of the public attending the meeting.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind.
Sure, could you state your first and last name and your address?
Greg Mooney, 39 Gollin. This is
Hi, Greg.
actually, hi, sorry. This is kind of just to what you guys were just talking about. Can you reference to me the state statutes for the housing? It would help me. I'd like to look that up.
Why don't you look it up and bring it to us? You know, I don't think any of us are familiar with the statute by statute number. We
Okay.
do have a copy of the mandates from the state, and if you want to contact Paula Stahl, our town planner, I'm sure she'd be happy to pass along a copy of those regulations. And if you
So
could do
you
that
guys
during
don't know
office hours.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
no, I
yeah.
was, for my own self, would like to look those up. I just didn't know if handy you had them.
Oh, and you know what? We welcome your input in a public hearing or even in through audience of citizens at a regular meeting. We don't want to wait for that input till the last minute. We're really looking for any interested perspective that we can get on it. And I welcome you to do it. But the most efficient thing for you, I think, is to contact Paula. Either you can send her an email, you can get her email address at our town website, or you can call the building office, 228-0440, and you could leave a message.
Yep.
Or she's typically
Great.
in the office on Thursdays and part of Mondays, correct?
And I'll tell
If you had it handy, I was going to jot it down, but yes, I'll do that research.
Okay, Yeah, but yeah, we have,
I'll be happy to
certainly
give
have a
it-
copy. She'll be able to send it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your help. Anything else from the members of the public? I take that. Somebody isn't muted there. Okay. I'm going to move on to, we're going to go into
Let-
executive session, then we will adjourn our meeting. We're not. Somebody is saying something. Are you trying to say something or is that just background noise?
That's background noise.
Okay.
I just want to let people know that if you're not on the commission, I will be removing you from the participant list.
And we won't be discussing any more regular business at the end of our executive session. We'll just be, the only thing on the agenda is that we can adjourn. So I appreciate anyone who's attended. Thank you.
And give me a moment here.
Okay, just commission members and Paula and Joshua.
Yes.
Okay, so Joshua, you're not taking minutes during this part of our discussion. So I had a conversation. So I'll make a motion that we adjourn our meeting.
Second,
Second,
Rich got that? All those in favor, raise your hand or say
Aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
that looks unanimous to me. Thank you, everyone, for this evening.
good night.
Just so you know, not part of the regular meeting. So I'm going to discuss with Mark and Steve a written process for our zoning.